Tonight on Buffy, in a world of evil,
What's he doing here?
who can the chosen one trust?
Buffy!
Critics call it the surprise hit of the season. Buffy, tonight on the WB.
Hello, hello. I'm Juliet. Psst. We're going to sleep. Want to come? We are so excited that you are here today. I am just so thrilled. We want to talk to you about your career, your life, and of course, Owen on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So,
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm really excited. It was actually, I think, my second guest star. I think I'd done a couple little co-stars, and then I got a show called Dark Skies with Eric Close, who's still a friend, and then
Wow.
I got Buffy right after that. And at the time, Buffy was not on the air yet.
No.
And so it was this little unknown thing. And it was like, when you knew the movie, and it was kind of like, at the time, it was sort of a little show that could, and everybody was like, what is it? Is it really going to go? Everybody, the cast was still getting to know each other. It was funny because David Boreanaz, he was actually kind of upset because I got the first kiss.
Ah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. David was like, oh, come on, man. You to kiss Sarah before I do.
What's going on here? So I can't wait to get more in depth into Buffy. Let's go back first and can you talk a little bit about growing up in Washington and what your childhood and your life was like there?
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Yakima, Washington, and that's the Yakima Indians. So it's right off a reservation. It used to be completely known for apples. Now it's quite a lot of good wine is coming from the Yakima Valley. Pears, ton of orchards. I had nothing to complain about. By the time I was born, my father was an attorney in a firm in Yakima, and my mother taught at the college. She was a PhD in English, actually being Danish. And English was actually her fourth language, and she had a PhD in it. So, and then my sister was 9 years older than me, so she was gone most of my growing up. But she went to Columbia undergrad, Harvard Law, and then became this big to do attorney on Fox News for a while. Yeah. So it was a good childhood. I was in a lot of sports and got good enough grades to get in the University of Washington, barely, and discovered theater kind of by accident. I was driving in the summer in Eastern Washington to go over the lake with my friend, and we got pulled over. We thought we got pulled over by a policeman, and this was in the middle of nowhere, Waterford, like Waterville, Washington. And a policeman says, no, actually, we're not pulling you over. You probably were speeding. There's a movie being shot up there. And we were like, no way, why is it? When you're on set, people sometimes ask you, well, why are you shooting here? Right? Because we need this location. This looks like something. So can we go up and see it? And so literally we drive up, and there's this one farmhouse. It's fields and fields and fields of wheat, huge lights. There's this big crane, a guy up the top kind of screaming at people, doing this and that. There's probably 200 people all around. And then I'm watching this, my jaw drops. And then out of this little shack, they say cut. And this guy, tall, handsome guy, Brad Johnson, comes out with Holly Hunter. And it was the movie Always.
Wow, the Spielberg film.
Spielberg,
oh my God.
Up on the thing.
My gosh.
I go to my buddy, I said, that's what I want to do. Of course, I went to the University of Washington. I was a drama major there. Did plays like Henry V and Owl and the Pussycat and
yes. And so the Owl and the Pussycat is a two-hander, I know, because I have worked on it and stuff. Did you do Lone Star? Is that correct?
That's right. I did Lone Star. God, yeah, that's right. I did Lone Star. And I love the theater. And my instructor, Robin Hunt, was like, no, you're TV, I think you're TV. And I was like, all right, I think I'm TV. And I moved to, I graduated, and then ABC Daytime was doing a
yes. Can you say how, because you did this whole, like, you won this major search, right?
Yeah, it was a national search. I came to Seattle. I'd literally just graduated from college, and I was like, well, do I really do this? Do I go to law school? Again, because my father was a lawyer, my sister was a lawyer, my grandfather was a judge. And so I was like, well, I auditioned for Mary Lynn Henry, she was the president of ABC Daytime Casting at the time. This was 1993. And she came out and I auditioned and she said, all right, I've got Texas and one other place, but you're the choice for Seattle. And, she kind of winked and a nod. And she said, the year before or 2 years before, she took Brendan Fraser. And then she also took James Caviezel, who was my fraternity brother. So we were sleeping guys at the University of Washington. Yeah. So she had a pretty good track record.
Yeah. Good taste.
Brendan went 3 years before me, I think. And Jim went maybe 2 years before me. She flew me to New York and I met with all the soaps and I was designated All My Children, or as they said in the day, All My Kids, because that was the tall soap. But I had to wait. They didn't have a part for me yet.
Now you're young and it's just like, you're already here. It's just like, that's insane. Like,
what's going
on?
Literally didn't. So obviously I got agents from that. So I was 22, poor, broke. So they paid.
As you are at that age.
Yeah, right. I tried for about 6 months. They didn't have a part for me. So I had 2 jobs. I was a personal trainer in the morning and then I would go on auditions and I was a Gap security guard at night. I just applied to the Gap because that's what you did in 1993. There's Gaps everywhere. But I couldn't fold clothing. I was a horrible.
So you were not suited well for the Gap job.
No. And they were like, wow, this guy, and I asked my wife, I still can't fold clothes. But they said, they looked at me and the one was like, wait a minute, you're like 6'3", right? Almost 200 pounds. And yeah, I'm 6'3", 195, something like that. How about, would you want to become a security guard and we would pay you $3 more an hour and you don't have to fold any clothes? You stand by the door with a walkie-talkie. I'm like, yeah, great.
Yeah.
So I did that and they stole the store. I was a terrible security guard. Terrible. I had to like count sunglasses at the end of the night. I was like, we lost 3 more. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not,
You had other things on your mind. There was other places you were going to go.
I was a lousy, as you can tell, I've got a lot of energy and a lot of like focus everywhere. So that didn't last too long. And then I moved to Los Angeles because I said, well, I'll wait in Los Angeles instead of New York.
Oh, I was going to ask you something. Yeah. So you mentioned that your dad was an attorney. Was he also with the FBI? Is that correct?
He was in the FBI. Yes, my dad was in the FBI. They were in Utah with my mom. I think my sister was born right around there. And then they moved to Dallas, Fort Worth when Kennedy was shot. And he was in fact, until he died, he was talking about Lee Harvey Oswald's wife. But he was the point guy for her.
What?
Wow.
Yeah. So he got to know her. He was also one of the guys that went out, tested the shot. And he was a company man. He said to this day, there was no conspiracy. There was no Oswald acted alone. Now, maybe he was manipulated some other way, but the FBI never had that.
And was he involved in the Mississippi riots and investigating that as well?
Yes, he was. He had to move motels every other night because they were trying to blow him up. Crazy.
Wow.
From a personal standpoint, he had a toothache and he drove from Dallas to Oxford, Mississippi. And he was also in Natchez, but mainly Oxford. And all he talks about is like, yeah, these guys are trying to blow me up, but I had the worst toothache.
Oh my
and I couldn't find a good dentist in Mississippi to get my tooth fixed. The FBI back then too, you had to have a law degree to get in or you had to be an accountant. So you had to have not only obviously undergraduate, you had postgraduate degrees to get into the FBI at that point. And Hoover was pretty tough on all those guys. So, and we asked him questions, my son would ask him questions too. And hey, did you ever kill anybody? And my dad would always kind of say, well, I definitely had some scrapes. But then if you ask him, did you ever fire your gun? He would say, yes, I fired my gun. And what he'd always say is FBI agents, when you fired your gun, you weren't shooting to wound or to stop. You were shooting to kill. You shot to kill. If you didn't kill your target in one bullet, Hoover had you writing reason by reason by reason by reason why you had to discharge more than one bullet, unless there was obviously 2 suspects.
Per suspect, one bullet per suspect.
Wow, that's intense. How was it for you? Did you think this was like everyone had this kind of upbringing? Did you know that it was sort of unusual? What was that like for you growing up with that?
So to me, I guess I just kind of grew up with that kind of normal. They were tough parents. My parents were very strict. I had to make grades. I had to be in, obviously I loved sports, but there was always a bar that
Yeah.
it wasn't just sort of, there was an expected sort of excellence, and the bar was there, and I would always go right to the bar.
That's enough.
Right. Have some balance in your life. But was it a pressure because of that? Because you're all obviously exceedingly high achievers. So was that a pressure always to feel like you had
Yes.
to go up to that bar?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it strengthened me. I mean, I think sometimes, and my dad knew this, that I was a tough kid. And so he knew he could press certain buttons to get what he thought I needed to out of me. And I did. And I still had managed to have fun and have have a good life. But yeah, there was definite pressures, stuff that, took time to work through as an adult, but especially with my father.
How did all of that inform how you went about raising your son? Like, how did you decide, okay, what was valuable to take and what you wanted to do differently?
I think I took two definite things. One, I took the somewhat sternness with my son, because my son has so much capacity and is this, he's 15, he's a beautiful kid. He's already 6'2", and
you make a
doing
family
great.
of specimens.
he's this great kid, and he's so sweet, but he needs to be pushed. I'm not one of these parents that want to be his friend, and I have two stepkids too that are amazing, and they all know that I'm not their buddy. I'm their dad, and maybe someday we can be buddies, but until their brains have formed and they're responsible, great human beings, then my job is not to be buddies. My job is to be a parent. At the same time, my parents never, which is sort of the time that it was they never really hugged me. They never really said that they loved me. I mean, they did, and I knew they did. It's not like I was, gosh, Mom, you never told me you love me. I mean, my wife, my dad tell Sharon all the time, I love you. I'm like, what's going on? That's
what about me?
So when they're getting older, I know, like, all right, whatever. No, both my mom and my dad, the I love yous for my wife was like all over the place. I'm like,
what am I, chopped liver? What's going on here?
Right. So I tell my son every phone call when I'm with him, I tell him all the time I love him, I hug him, I do so. I've kind of taken both good and bad from what my parents taught me. And, we all make mistakes. God,
Yeah. So when you booked the series regular on Bull, what was that like? And tell us a little bit about that job.
Oh, it was a great job. First of all, I'd done two big pilots the 2 years before that weren't picked up. One was a pilot called Bronx County that was brilliant. It was a huge show with Sidney Pollack producing, Thomas Carter directing, John Sinkert Young was producer. I mean, big producers, and unfortunately it didn't go, but it was big enough to get me a deal at CBS. So then I did a deal. I did the next pilot with Amanda Peet called Partners, and Mark Helgenberger and a bunch of people, and that was a really good show. John Scheck, and really good show, and again, it was not picked up at the deadline, right? So as you know, it was right at the end, and that's when pilot season, we're talking about what, 99, 98. I mean, the pilot season was pilot season back then. It was all out from, basically mid-January until you booked, usually, right? That's, or if you didn't, then you were exhausted at the end of April or whatever, right? But I read the script to Bull in, say, May. I read the character Carson Boyd, wet behind the ears, broker with strong values and sort of this big Saint Bernard, and I read it. It was the writing from Michael Chernichin, who had exec produced Law and Order forever. Brilliant writer. And it's one of those shows where the dialogue, you say it, you read it once, and you know it.
It goes in because it's so well written.
It's so well written. It's thought after thought after thought, right? And that paid off, because at one point the show was short. They had cut a monologue that I hadn't even seen. They gave me the monologue the night before. They, Chris, we got to shoot this tomorrow. You want last or first up? And I was like, I'll take first up because I'm fresh in the morning. And then they made it a oneer with a baby.
My God. Then do they want you on your head also and juggling it all at the same time? My gosh.
Exactly. So Keith was like, Keith Samples, right? He was like, I'm going to go around. I'm going to do it. Is it okay with the oneer? And you got the baby. And I'm like, yeah. And it was a great monologue about Roger Maris and the Baseball Hall of Fame, and how I was going to take my son, who was a baby, who cooed at one point, and I was like, "Oh my God, we got it in two, right? We moved on. We saved it."
Okay, reset. How's your juggling?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Exactly. It's like, So I was on this rocking chair. I picked the baby up and I sat with the baby and then we did the thing. And I mean, as you love, I mean, that was on my reel, God, for, I mean, way too long because I was like, all right, I'm really not, however old I was then, 28 now. I got to take it off the reel, but it was great. Liz Rome, Alicia Coppola, Georgie
Did you say
Newbern.
Liz Rome?
Liz Rome was on
Oh
the show.
my
Yeah,
gosh,
Liz
yeah,
Rome.
because we worked together
That's
on
right.
Angel.
He was working on Angel.
Liz.
She was finishing up on Angel when she shot the pilot. And then that's right. It was Liz and Alicia Coppola and George Newbern. And then, and then the guest cast too, which, I mean, Stanley Tucci did the first 6 episodes, Donald Moffat. I mean,
Did you get to work with Larry Miller?
Fabulous.
yes, Larry Miller. Larry Miller.
I love Larry Miller.
He was so funny. He's best friends with Michael Chernyshyn, the showrunner. And in the pilot, there's a scene where I get in trouble, something happens, and I'm pulled up with Donald Moffat, who's the grandfather, who's the patriarch of the stockbroker firm. And Larry's kind of his henchman. And Larry he would leer at me in these things. And I was like, finally, Larry, you're so funny. Like literally, he just sits there. And he's
funny. Right.
He's one of the funniest.
Right. I mean, he just embodies funny. I'm like, Larry, you can please let me get through this scene.
We're never gonna get this. You have to
We're never gonna get it.
down.
We're never gonna get it. And Donald was like, I go, Donald, you gotta call me a junkyard dog too. You gotta use the clear and present danger quotes, Donald, because he played the president of the United States. And I was like,
yeah.
So no, it was a wonderful show. It was my first series to go to network. It was TNT's first original series. Poured a ton of money into it. Unfortunately, we shot 22, but I think when episode 4 or 5 or 6 hit, the stock market crashed. Yeah, so we were then we went from, I mean, Michael was pitching the show for 10 years. He finally pitched it at Warner Brothers, and we shot 22. I only think maybe 14 aired, which was a real bummer.
Such a bummer. And it's so crazy how just, timing is everything, right?
Timing is everything. I mean, it's, if I had a nickel almost for my series where, the next one was First Monday, which with James Garner and Charlie Durning, Joe Mantegna and myself. I mean, literally, and then
too bad it's not a strong cast or anything, right?
Yeah.
I know, and that's even just some of the Supreme Court justices. It was Donald Belisario who did everything. It's Don's show, and Don directed the pilot. But I'll never forget when the night we premiered, David Letterman did a joke on his monologue saying, "Did anybody see First Monday that premiered on a Tuesday that's actually going to air on a Friday?" Yeah. Goodbye. See you later. Huge expensive show, mid-season replacement, and we were off, and they aired all 12. It was a mid-season replacement, but they didn't pick it up.
Oh my gosh. And what was, you said earlier you had a story, and we said, wait till we're on camera. James Garner and Charles Durning. So please share with us.
Yeah, so I was the young guy again on First Monday, and I had a lot of wonderful scenes, a lot of wonderful work with James Garner, who played the Chief Justice, and Charlie Durning, Second World War vet. I mean, stories, and Joe. And I remember one day I drove up. I would usually in location. I usually drive a Bronco, but this time I drove up, and I'd leased a Porsche. I thought
Not bad.
I thought that my success was just never going to end. I mean, it was just going to keep going. I was just going to work for 40 years, and there wouldn't be any bumps in the road. It's really clairvoyant. Jesus. So I drive up, and James is walking in, and he looks at me and looks at my car. Said, "Son, come sit down. Are you saving your money?" "Oh, yeah, kind of. I didn't buy it. It's a lease. You know what I mean?" He's like, "You will have bad years." Charlie Durning pipes in, "Hell, I've had bad decades." And I'm like, wow, all right, guys, be a killjoy. But no, I took that.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I was all right. I invested in property, and I did things. I didn't, that was my one big sort of 3 years
extravagance,
and it was fun. I turned.
When am I going to have a chance to do this again?
Right? Yeah, right. And so, at least at the time, I don't know. Go ahead.
That was such great advice. Hearing from people like that, we actually, Guillermo del Toro mentored us on my directorial feature debut. And one of the things he was saying is that he has spent more of his time not working in his life and pitching and things not coming together. But he's like, if I put it all together, my directing time of my life is like a decade. It's like 10 years, but all the stuff in between. And people don't realize that when you look at a successful career, that even people that are working to that level still are not working to the degree that people think they are or that they want to be.
I remember when I was in New York and it was a commercial audition, I thought, and there was an older gentleman in there and he was obviously auditioning for something else. And gosh, if I could just get this commercial, I could just get paid for this. If I go do this commercial, I could work on this commercial, I get paid. I could pay a couple bills. And he said, son, the work you do for free. It's the waiting you get paid for.
Wow.
That's great.
And I was like, wow, geez, well, I should really be getting paid a lot then.
I should be a multimillionaire. Well, Guillermo told us that the day after he had swept the Oscars with The Shape of Water, he went in for a pitch at Fox, and he was kind of had a swagger in his step, and he went through this whole pitch, and he got turned down right on the spot in the room, and he was like, "What? Like, seriously?
Yeah.
What is
are you
it
talking
take?"
about? I just won the Academy Award. And
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart, right?
No.
I talk at the University of Washington whenever I go back to the drama kids, and I always say, my first question to all of them, I say, listen, you think you could do anything else?
Anything else? Yeah, you should. Yes, you should if you feel like you can.
If you think you could do anything else and be somewhat happy, go do it. Go now. Even now, there used to be a very, very small working class actor. There was maybe 3,000 or 4,000 of us, maybe 5,000 at times, 6,000. Now, I don't know that there is that anymore.
No, it's sort of like what's happened in our country where there is no middle, like it's either high or low. Like there isn't the working actor that makes a constant living as an actor. That has really gone by the wayside.
I think so, yeah, because again, the commercials, there's not many union commercials anymore. I mean, I made my first couple of years of it. I did a ton of commercials. And
yeah, did you get my SAG card was a commercial? Was yours? Yeah.
I was the Lee Jean guy. I was
eyeglasses for me, and
I could see that.
I was such a newbie. I didn't even know. Like I went to the audition. It was actually a really fun audition that was all improvisation, and I kind of went. I want to do movies. And then I booked it. And then when I went for the wardrobe fitting, they said, "Oh, you must be excited. This is a national commercial." I didn't even know what that. I was like, "What does that mean?" And they said, "Oh, it's especially at that time, it was a lot of money." And I was like, "Okay, this is a good thing. I'm getting very excited now."
Right? Yeah. No. Lee Jeans. I had a Ford truck campaign. I bought my first road bike with a Ford truck campaign money in it.
Not a Porsche.
I mean, Campbell Soup with Wayne Campbell Soup with Wayne Gretzky. I did Pamela Anderson. I did International Pizza Hut with Pamela Anderson. I did.
Whoa.
I want to ask you, because I think also the Buffy audience I'd love to ask you a little bit, because you've guest starred on so many shows. What was it like guest starring on Charmed for you?
Charmed was great. I'll always remember Charmed because I worked later with Shannon again. Shannon was amazing. Shannon was, I'm sure is what you call, Shannon was sort of a dame, but she was great. I call it the show that lasts for centuries because we started shooting it in 99 and we finished it in 2000. And somebody got sick, or one of the girls, maybe it just took literally like centuries to shoot the show. And I remember because I was doing ER at the same time, and so there was a couple rubbing in some conflicts, but Shannon was great, Holly was great, Alicia they were really nice, and we had fun because I was playing a bad villain, which I love doing. I think I was a snake that would turn into a human, and there was a couple other really good other actors that played that, and we just kind of chased the girls around, I think, for an hour.
I like how you say that so casually too, because obviously it's a supernatural show, but I think I was a snake that turned into and you just say it in passing.
I gotta ask, because I'm staring at the poster this whole time. Playmakers.
You are obviously an athlete in real life as well, and you've played a number of athletes, so I would love to hear about Playmakers as well.
Again, here's an interesting thing. I never would have seen the audition, but I used to get the breakdowns.
Oh, yeah, I did that too.
I would comb the breakdowns, and love Gersh. I was with Gersh at the time, but my quote was here, and Playmakers was only paying.
Oh, so they hadn't submitted you.
They didn't submit me. So I called my manager. I said, I want in on this show. No matter what happens, I want in on this show. It was less than half my quote. And it was Favored Nations. It was Orly Adelson, it was Ken Eisendrath, who he was coming off of 90210 and a couple other things. But again, brilliantly written. What I didn't know is they wrote a monologue for the quarterback, McConnell, and they gave it to me. I went in, and it was probably, if not, my bull audition was really great from Peter Roth, the president of Warner Brothers. But the Playmaker audition was so good.
It just clicked.
Yeah, I just clicked, and it was a quarterback, and it was in front of all my team, and it was a rallying thing, and they were just sort of like sitting there going, okay, can you wait outside? And then they came back in. They said, we have one note. Can you play it maybe a little bit more, a little lower, a little? And I did that, and they were like, great. I went home. They called, they said, they want you to come back because they really want you to play the lead. They really want you to play the linebacker. And great casting. Meg Lieberman and Meg was like, Chris, you're the quarterback. Stick with your story. Go back in, meet with them again. And so I went back in and I said that. I said, yeah, you know what? The pilot and maybe some of the first season will not be as heavy on the quarterback. But if I do my job right, the second season, the third season will be all about the quarterback. And they were like, okay, they made some changes too. They had some plans for the quarterback. They completely rewrote it. We had a wonderful time in Toronto. The crazy thing was we were in Toronto for 6 months. The show premiered there, didn't premiere in Canada. So we didn't really have any idea. We saw pictures of us, on buildings, on skyscrapers, on buses. I mean, the ad campaign, ESPN just went all out. Disney went all out. And so by the time when we did finally come back, the first night in New York, I took a train down. It was something I had people mobbing me. It was a crazy and thinking, and it was not just men, it was women. Women loved the show. The great thing was it was so much fun and we loved it. And so then again, timing, ratings are through the roof, critical acclaim, right? So we're gold. As one of the president of Fox said, this is a Tiffany show. You will get awards. You will listen to that. AFI Drama of the Year somewhere. Nicole Kidman gave me the thing. And then 2 weeks later, after I got the AFI Drama of the Year, they canceled us. And they canceled us because the NFL, the owners of the NFL, told Disney, who were negotiating Monday night and Sunday night football, they said, if you want ABC and ESPN, if you want Sunday night and Monday night football, the very first thing you do is cancel Playmakers. And not only cancel Playmakers, bury it so nobody else could buy it. So I go from I'm going to be on the show. The second season was all going to be, it was a lot like a Brett Favre who lost his dad. It was going to be a Brett Favre story where I would lose my dad and just like that.
That's so insane.
That's so heartbreaking, that experience, because it was such a perfect role for you too. And I wanted to explain to the listeners who don't know, when Chris was talking about favored nations, that means in a contract where all of the actors are being paid the same amount of money. And that's what favored nations means. But
yeah, they were all paid. So we were all the lead cast was paid, but they all actually threw me a party because what was not in there, it was favored nations, but all shows weren't guaranteed. I think they were guaranteeing 10 out of the 13 or whatever. And my agent was like, I'm not only taking half of my salary cut, we're guaranteeing all the episodes.
All the episodes.
So I got that for the whole cast.
Wow. So were you told fairly quickly then, from that moment of the high to it being canceled? That was kind of, it sounds like it happened pretty fast.
It happened. And unfortunately, this time it happened sort of right as pilot season was going. So you go from this hit show, great part, brilliant part for me.
It seems inexplicable that would happen.
I'm sure there's another example of you have a hit show, you're critically acclaimed, and it's canceled. I don't know what it is, but
there's the political stuff that goes into everything.
Right, exactly. So I'm sure it's happened, and so, but you have to reboot and go, all right, well, I'm a professional actor. I've got to go
look for your next job.
Look for my next job. I go from I think 9-10 years. I couldn't have played against a quarterback for maybe 10. Maybe I could. I don't know. But but at least 5 or 6 years. Right?
On TV, we can do these things.
Yeah, that's right. We can do
People
everything.
are 35 playing high school.
Exactly. Tom Brady. Look at Tom Brady. I mean, so I go from that to going in on some stuff and having a real difficult time rebooting. I got another athlete, which is funny. This is another funny thing about Playmakers real quick. So when I first got to Los Angeles, big, tall, got athletic, people would see me for athletic parts, and I got a bunch of athletic parts, guest stars. But when Bronx County to play a lawyer, they fought my manager. They're like, no, he's an athlete. He can't play a lawyer. He can't play a Wall Street lawyer. He can't do that. So then I book Bronx County, where I played a lawyer, and then I play another lawyer in the next pilot, and I play a stockbroker in the next one. And the next one after that, I play a lawyer again. So when Playmakers came up, the first thing they said, no, he wears too many suits. He's like a lawyer. He can't play an athlete.
Oh my gosh, I know the imagination, right?
My manager's like, he is
an
That's his
athlete.
Hollywood, right?
Then you change your outfit. How did he
No,
do
he's
that?
So will you talk to us a little bit about your film, The Devil's Doll, which you starred in, you wrote, and you produced, which is on IFC?
It's more of a thriller horror, and it was originally called the Worry Dolls. Over the Guatemalan dolls that are in a box, you put your worries in them at night. Then in the morning, your worries are supposed to disappear, right?
Oh.
Well, what happens if these dolls get into the hands of a serial killer that's being executed at midnight? He's whispering in all his sins and all his worries into these dolls. So the dolls really don't get to exercise the demons. And then the next day, the detective takes the dolls' evidence in his car, and his daughter finds them, makes them into jewelry, and then the dolls are dispersed and mayhem hits. And that's the film I was doing in Mississippi with Devil's Dolls, where there's nothing to do with devil, but that's
the original title sounds like it really
Evil
fit
Dead had no dead
movie.
Worry
people.
Dolls. Yeah, I think I have that poster. I have the original poster there with Worry Dolls on it, and IFC, and
The distributor does what they, and you're like, but that doesn't make sense.
IFC and Studio Canal picked it up too. So we were like, all right, whatever you guys want to do, and there was times we didn't have all the money. I'm at Walmart because that's all there is. There's one Walmart, and I'm walking around calling my investors, going, listen, if we don't get this other 150K and we don't get this 200K,
right, none of it's going forward. Right.
Yeah, we shut down. Our crew will walk, and our crew is from California, our crew's from New Orleans, our crew's from if they don't get their paycheck on Friday, they will walk. And I'm talking to my investors that are like saying, all right, you guys can't do that. We're getting on the Lear here on Friday and going to New Orleans, and we're gonna come to set. I go, well, there's not gonna be a set if you guys don't kick in this amount of money. And eventually, right? I'm like sitting there sweating in
stress.
I got goosebumps from that because I get the stress. I'd be
the constant have you ever seen the Art Linson movie? I think it's called What Just Happened. I think it's called, and De Niro is in it, and he plays a producer, and he's sort of on the phone for a lot of the movie, and he's trying to put this project together, and it's basically like he's in the corridor, like it keeps almost happening, and then all these things. It's actually you watch.
It's not Wag the Dog. Wag the Dog is.
It's a little like that, yeah. And yes,
Barry Levinson.
Yeah,
and he's like, one of his quotes.
This is nothing. This is nothing.
This is nothing. This is like
nothing. I say that all the time because of that movie.
Yeah, it's exactly perfect.
Well, there was one time.
There's those movies where they're really funny, but they also make you have heart palpitations because you're like, wait, this is too close to home.
Too close, and we're gonna bring it in. It's just how, I told my big partner, money guy, I said, listen, I always bring them in. I bring my movies in, bring them in on budget, but I gotta have certain things. I gotta have this to bring them in, it's gosh, it is. It's making me tired.
Getting hot.
Oh God.
You ever see Living in Oblivion?
Oh yeah, that's similar, right?
No, but yeah.
And Lost in La Mancha. It's actually about the Terry Gilliam movie with Johnny Depp and like everything that could possibly go wrong with the movie, including with one of the actors.
Right, with Marlon Brando. Is that the one where
No, you're thinking of Lost Souls, the Richard Franklin movie about the island of Dr. Moreau.
The island of Dr. Moreau, which I read for, actually. I was.
Really?
Did you dodge a bullet?
I was there when it was his movie to begin with, and actually, went back and back and back, and then it changed from Richard Stanley to, that was a whole.
And he was crazy, like Brando wouldn't leave his trailer, and then somebody else would, it was
Val Kilmer. The famous quote with John Frankenheimer, who took over from Richard Stanley, was, if I was making the Val Kilmer biopic, I would not hire Val Kilmer because it was that difficult.
Yeah, right. Oh my God.
We touched a little bit at the beginning, and you were sharing some of your experience. How were you cast as Owen?
Again, walking into those little stages, and it was kind of a weird, going upstairs, and it was kind of like I think it was like a fruit warehouse. It was something else before. I think
converted.
They converted
Yeah,
it. And I don't know, did Buffy convert it? I wasn't sure if they did or if it was somebody else, but
I think they did, but I'm not sure either. But yeah, so you went up to the production at the back
production
of the
offices
same production.
upstairs.
Yeah.
They were looking for, again, nobody really knew about the show. I didn't know, Buffy the Vamp, so I knew kind of the
Had you read a script or just pages?
I'm sure just pages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I didn't have, again, I only had one guest star to my name, Dark Skies. I did two guest stars, two co-stars. I had Jag and Space Above and Beyond or something. And so literally I had maybe 3 or 4 credits, and it was a big guest star, and it was and so they worked with me a bunch. And I think what they liked is sort of, again, I'm 6'2", 6'3", so I physically but I had this quality of naivete, wide-eyed. Again, I think that's what they really liked. And I was again, I'd only been in town for probably maybe a year. I'd only done, like I said, I'd done several commercials. Jag was I had 2 lines on Jag where the plane blew up and I didn't tell them that thing that burned my arm, and so I was so green. It's like, oh, marks, I gotta hit these marks, and so that was a real education. And to work with, obviously, with Sarah, who was, she was a pro at, she'd already been in the business for 15 years or whatever, and they were all Nick was just awesome, and Nick was still wide-eyed. I mean, he was waiting tables 2 months before. And Allison was great. And obviously Charisma, Charisma and I then worked together. We worked together on that. We did a movie in South Africa together. And then we did this series that I've been doing the last couple of years. And so it was, I've been working with Charisma forever.
Wow.
And how was Owen described to you? What was the adjectives and sort of the tenor? Obviously, you're saying sort of your wide-eyedness was
sort
part
of
of that.
Wide-eyed, sort of naive, smart in intellect, and so when I saw that, I was like, oh boy, I'm gonna really have to do some acting. But it was, I think, but they wanted him to be sweet, but not overly sensitive because Sarah was so tough, like you couldn't be like weak or anything. But it was a great character because it was sensitive. He was sensitive. He's caring. He's thoughtful. He is wide-eyed, but he's smart, and he wasn't afraid to be smart. And then again at the end, I mean, the turn is this is amazing. I want to keep doing this. This is incredible. Like, when can we go? When can we do it again?
What do you think for you was the essence and the key for your way into the character?
The essence of him being so sweet, and then but also knowing poetry, and like my mother, who was a PhD in English and taught Shakespeare, so that for me was sort of natural getting into that. I know a lot of literature. Mom,
yeah, that's perfect, right?
Yeah,
that you had all that background.
Obviously, it was Emily Dickinson, and so that for me was a real help, and to know how, just like literature, just like music, really good literature, really good music, it hopefully transforms you to a different place. It can even change body chemistry, right? If it, and that's what I look for in music the same way. I like songs that move me, that remind me of things, that take me somewhere, and same with literature. And I think that's how I kind of grew into Owen. And then also sort of his sort of naivete. I come from a small town, and so moving to New York and then moving to Los Angeles, it's very similar. I mean, I think as a young kid too, I didn't have sarcasm as much in small towns. Sarcasm is not really, people. And now I'm a really sarcastic guy. So I go home and people are like, "Is he serious?" My mother-in-law all the time is like, "Is he kidding right now?
Is he joking, or is that?"
Nicholas was so fresh too, and so funny. David was great. I mean, David, Midwest guy, so we got along great. And everybody didn't. Again, we weren't on the air. Yeah, they weren't on the air, so it wasn't. Nobody knew. And that's if you can get those sort of special, Juliet, I'm sure you know too. You get kind of in before for me, we were all young kids really having fun.
Did you know the reference to Soylent Green? Like, were you familiar with the
I was not, and then they
1972
told me
film?
what it was.
Wow.
Yeah, and my coach James Reese always mentions Soylent Green too, which is funny. But I wasn't at the time. And he's this deep thinker. He's very literate. Obviously knows his films. That was really fun to kind of, because again in high school, a lot of those times, those kids are ostracized or put out. To be sort of this character that's rewarded,
Desirable. Yeah, that's rewarded for it and desirable. And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's kind of an introvert. He's just like kind of a shut-in introvert.
He was an introvert.
He's going to the library when he meets Buffy to get a book. Like he wants to go and read. And
Yeah, absolutely.
He got a taste of adventure though. So
taste of adventure. It was all over after that.
I also love how there's that scene where you have the antique watch and then Xander has his like goofy Tweety Bird watch. And there's definitely like a lot of jealousy runs through this episode in terms of the themes of the episode. And it sounds like even off stage when David was like, hey, how come you get the first on-screen kiss? Do you remember with the scene that you were doing in the hallway with Xander and the watches and all that stuff? Is there anything that you remember particularly about that scene because it played so well?
I just remember, and I got goosebumps thinking about it. I just remember how great Nicky was, because he would do one take and then he would try something different. He was so in the moment and knew that character like the back of his hand. It was sort of like Nick, and sort of insecure and all over the place, but heart of gold. Nick played that so well. And I remember us laughing and having fun with it because it was insane. It was a lot of fun.
How much of your stuff did you shoot on location and how much were you at the Stewart Street sound stages?
Most of it was at Stewart Street. I do remember going to Buffy's house. I do remember the high school. But I think after that, I think most of it, if it was, I think I probably shot all 8 days or, 7 out of the 8. We were maybe 4 or 5 of them was on the stages. And I think a lot of that was obviously intent too, because it was a new show and it did go long. The hours were already long. So too many company moves.
Yes.
I think that would have really have, killed them. Yeah, and we had some 20-hour days on that episode. And I remember the band, the band was turned into a big band because I had the song in my head, the dancing, and the band was there, and they turned into a pretty big, which has happened to me several times on different shows. You kind of have this band, and then the band blows up, and it's a cool band, and I can still hear the 4 chords that kept going, and then we stopped, we keep going, we dance.
Have it over and over and over.
Yeah, over and over. Oh my God, I'm so sick of this song. But then the song was a big song. I mean, Buffy. I mean, they really did it right.
You also were mentioning something earlier. You've made me think of so many different things. And one of the things when you were bringing up the fact that the show wasn't on the air yet, it's such a different thing when you go into audition for either a guest star, a recurring, even a series regular, although with a series regular part, you generally have a script depending on where you are in your career. But it's still different than when a show's on the air and you've seen it, so you know the tone, you know the world, you know what the universe that you're stepping into, and it's very different going in blindly and trying to guess to a certain degree, and then obviously get feedback in terms of that. So you had that in spades on Buffy.
Absolutely, I had, because obviously David is a great director too, and was still at the time, again, he was young, and again, I was only on for one episode, but I was a tool to kind of exactly for jealousy and for this and that, and to introduce.
Absolutely, you set everything in motion in terms of her relationship with Angel. Like, you are the pivotal point of all of that.
Yeah.
Exactly, right, and to show even the jealousy with charisma, and oh well, who's this guy now, and. There was the dynamic, and again with Nick too, and to show his kind of, Owen was used as a very nice tool to enhance, which again, that's what you hope to do, right? You hope to come in and triage, carve a performance that you think, again, I had no idea if my performance was going to be any good or not. Again, I was so naive. It was like, well, I think it's good. They're saying it's good, so it's going to be good, and I remember asking Sarah, as I said, she goes, yeah, you're doing great. And Allison too, who's a pro. And I mean, everybody was so nice and welcoming, and also knowing, and I was admitting, like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I really do.
Don't you think that when you work with a creator, showrunner, or director that has a really clear vision, it makes your job so much easier because you know the parameters? Because when you're guessing sort of and they're not clear, you're all more floundering. It doesn't, do you find that?
Absolutely. I love, especially younger in my career, I prided myself on being sort of a very directable actor. I was coming on and I wanted feedback. I wanted, okay, did this look good? Or do you think this or that? And then you get a little older and then you get on your own shows and Don Belisario, who's big, cigar smoking man. And I remember asking Don, I was shooting the pilot and I get this great scene done with Joe Montani and I'm ripping off all these things. And I think, I'm the cock of the walk. I know I crushed the scene. We break for lunch and I go over there to Don. I go, Don, is that pretty good? Or, do you want to see anything else? And he kind of saw it like smug kid. He's like, listen, if I don't like something, I'll tell you. Okay.
So do you have a favorite moment from the show yourself?
Probably what we talked about, that hall scene with Nikki and Sarah. And it was so much fun. We were acting, we were doing this TV show, and he was so funny. And the way that I reacted and the way Sarah, it was probably that. And then some of the stunt stuff, which was fun, fighting and the stuff that I got to do some of that.
I was going to ask, how did you do that? How did you do some of the stunt
yeah,
work?
It was mainly Sarah, obviously Sarah's stunt double, who's wonderful. And she would just tell me how to go here.
It was Sophia Crawford. She was brilliant.
Brilliant. And so she would teach me. She taught me. And then I think there was a few things that where they couldn't use me, but for most of it, and because I've tried again, something I try to take pride in. And
how did you navigate, what you were talking about before with Owen, that he starts out, as a much more introverted, deep thinking, bookish, deep character. And then when he has this experience, it makes him feel so alive. And he taps into this thrill seeker, adrenaline junkie part of himself. How did you navigate that arc to find that so that you could get to that place by the end? It's piqued his interest.
Well, again, it was so well written. I think as actors, especially, when you're younger and you're auditioning, and that sort of adrenaline rush is every time you walk in the room, right? And you're like, oh my God, I had been pumped so full of adrenaline, especially in some of my early auditions that, I was really close to Jerry Maguire playing Cush and meeting Cameron Crowe. And I just kind of like came in and vomited all over the room for the first like 15 minutes. And then we finally got down to playing, Cush and Cush Lash and for Jerry Maguire. And I was like, oh, I'm going to meet with Tom Cruise. So I think I kind of used a lot of that. All right, well, using sort of that in my real life and mimicking that, right? I mean, that was pretty easy. And then the way the writing was so good and that's why I've never been a gambler, because I was telling my wife, because I go to Las Vegas and I sit down at blackjack or I sit down at poker and I'm like, oh my God, this feels like an audition. I'm like nervous and I'm like, oh, my life is a gamble, right? I don't think
No, you do. It is. We live a certain sort of gypsy life. Obviously, we're probably not cut out for a 9 to 5. Some of the anxiety and pressure and whatever we obviously like to some extent, or we wouldn't go onto a set with 300 people and do a crazy emotional scene or whatever. But I'm with you in my real life. I'm like, no, I like to do that professionally. I like to really go to certain places that I don't need to do in my own tranquil life. Let's hope.
Yeah, exactly. And when I was younger, into my late 30s before I had my son, I didn't have much balance.
We were just talking about that with Julie Benz, one of the other actors on the show.
Julie? Yeah. I did a pilot with Julie and yeah.
Oh, Julie's amazing. Yeah. So we were talking about that, how we sort of had only career on the brain for such a long period. And now having more balance in your life, for me, my husband's like the best thing that ever happened in my life. And so, but I didn't have that. It was all like such kind of, that was only my life, really.
Right. Yeah. No, the same thing. And yeah, no, my wife is, the sun sets with my wife. I mean, I love her and she's everything for me.
If you had to guess where Owen is now, if Owen was really out there living, where would you see Owen now?
See, I see Owen I think that he did get that adrenaline kick, but I think that his love of literature, I see him as a college professor somewhere. I think he may have had a couple crazy fraternity nights maybe in college. But then I think Owen was just a serious enough kid and smart enough that he's a professor at Yale or something, married and
somewhere in Connecticut. I feel Connecticut.
Yeah, right. So upstate Connecticut, and he's doing just fine, and he's maybe coaching the baseball team too, or something like that, and his daughter maybe is in theater, and he's well to do for himself.
That's awesome. Why do you think Buffy has such legs with the audience?
So it's a great show to binge. Does the characters, they expand and they're going through all these different things, and I think also teenagers. My stepdaughter watched it a couple of years ago. She's 15. She watched it at 13, loved it. They relate. Again, you have sort of all the high school personalities, and kids are they need that. And I think it's also fast, still fast. So with kids these days, you need it to be pretty quick, moving, and so I think for all those reasons, it's got legs. Parents, that were kids that watched it. Now their kids are watching it, which is incredible.
What'd your stepdaughter say when she got to your episode?
No, I don't think she knew. And then she was like, "Oh my gosh, Chris, you're Owen, Chris." She does sometimes. She kind of forgets sometimes what I do.
Right. Because she has such a different relationship to you. So it sounds like 2008 was a very challenging time. You say that your first marriage was rocky. You weren't working at that juncture. And then you were diagnosed with a brain tumor. And so can you talk about your book, Trying to Walk Like a Man, the Chris Wiehl Playbook? The synopsis says that you had brain fluid leak from your nose, that you had brain surgery, that you nearly died, and that you had to learn how to walk again. Can you fill us in about the book and where people can get it, and also what you really learned from all the adversity that you went through?
It was a hard time in my life. My son was just born. He was born on November 29th, and I had a ringing in my ears. I thought it was a ringing in my ears. It was what it turns out to ringing in your ears, usually 10% hearing loss, or it's hearing loss when you hear a ring. You go to a loud concert, right? You come home, you hear that high ringing. Well, that's hearing loss, right? So in the summer of 07, I had that. I went in. My doctor said, "Oh, it's probably nothing. You're listening to your Walkman, or it's too loud. Just come back." And so I did. I waited for another 3 or 4 months. I went back, and they were like, "You know what? Let's give you a hearing test. Weird. You have 10% hearing loss in one ear. Let's get an MRI, CAT scan. Probably nothing." So I was like, "All right." So I got the MRI and CAT scan right before Christmas. I called because I said, "Hey, did you get my MRI, my CAT scan back?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, it's right here. We'll call you right back," or something like that. And then I was like, "Okay, great." And an hour goes by, and they call me right back. And my wife is overhearing at the time, and they were like, "Oh, you know what? We actually kind of lost that, but is there any way, but could you come in after Christmas?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah."
Wait, they lost it?
Well, they said they misplaced it. They weren't sure, but they weren't.
Okay.
They didn't lose it.
Okay, they just didn't want to say it over the
yeah.
phone. Okay.
Oh my God.
We kind of going, it was literally like December 23rd, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, "Oh, all right, yeah, shoot. Okay, yeah, I'll come in after Christmas." I get off the phone and my wife's like, "You idiot. That's bad. It's bad." And I'm like, "It's bad? Why is it bad?"
Whoa.
So go in on the 26th, doctor says you have it wasn't really well known at the time. It was called an acoustic neuroma. It's a benign brain tumor. It sets in the brain nerves of the facial nerve, which if you hit that, you're a stroke victim. If you nick that, it's on the audio nerve, the facial nerve, and the balance nerve.
Oh my gosh.
On both sides. Yeah, important stuff right back in here and right the surface of the brain. It was benign, but eventually it will kill you. So I take in brain surgery. My son was just born. He's a month old. My wife had postpartum, and it was just not a great deal. And so I took it all in and spent the next 7-8 months researching radiation. That you can either do gamma knife, cyber knife. There's various radiations. The problem with that is that if they miss, it can come back cancerous, malignant, and kill you in a year or so.
Oh my God.
A lot of that, there's no evasive surgery. It's a ray, right? It's a laser.
Yeah.
I chose a full right side craniotomy, where basically I have a scar from here, it goes up, shave that. So they basically take off side of your head, and they go in. They gave me a 50% chance of keeping my hearing, which I had 90% hearing. So I had very good hearing. They gave me a 50-50 chance of that. Unfortunately, it spasmed, the brain, the nerve cell spasmed on the way out. They had to get to it by cutting my balance nerve. So cut the balance nerve, they removed, it was basically the size of a pea. It's very small at the time. So so that's why my rehab was catastrophic, really, because I was so high functioning. A lot of people wait till it gets bigger. Then your brain actually assimilates better, right? And you lose more hearing. Well, I went from 90 to 0. Not only 90 to 0, I have a horrible tinnitus.
Oh, yeah.
Constant forever. It's always been there since post-op. So I'm stone deaf. They sever the balance nerve. I'm in ICU for 4 days where it's just quiet. They wear these black things, and because your brain is basically rebooting. And so when you wake up, my eyeballs were all over the place. I think I described it in the book as basically being on a roller coaster in space. So you're kind of it's all over the place for several days, and you're just trying your brain.
Your equilibrium is just all over the place.
Because eventually,
does it make you nauseous too because of all
complete nausea?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I got out and I was trying to make some jokes, and I'm throwing up, and it was not great. And I remember just telling my dad, I need everybody out, and then they put me in the neuro ICU, and then I got down after that on day 5. I get down to the recovery. You want to go home. I've been, you're in hospitals. They had a great neuro wing, but then I'm in recovery. They're the House Institute, which is a hearing institute. To be released, you need to be able to go to the bathroom, right? I mean, that's kind of like, and so I had to try to get to, and I tried crawling, the first few days. So I'd been there 7-8 days, and then my wife was like looking. It's like my nose was dripping a little bit. And I was like, oh, it's just maybe a little cold, and she's like, oh, it was clear liquid. So another thing that can happen is once they put you back together, they patch from fat from my stomach and they put it here. Well, that patch didn't seal. So brain fluid was leaking out of my nose. And so then they were like, all right, well, my neurosurgeon was gone. He was in New Orleans on something. And so I got another guy, and they were like, well, we have to stop this. We have to tap your spine and drain the fluid down to a certain level so it can heal, it can dry. Right, that fluid is coming up and it'll kill you if it doesn't.
Needs to, yeah.
So then they put me down in the ICU in St. Vincent's, which is in Koreatown, downtown Los Angeles. So then I'm in an ICU in St. Vincent's for another cloudy 7-8 days. And I just remember the first time I went down there, and my parents had gone home for the night, and the nurses were wonderful. Obviously, nurses run hospitals. But one was a Spanish-speaking nurse, the other was a Korean-speaking nurse, and they were shifting, and they didn't know what was going on. They had a level literally it's kind of a new exploratory thing they were doing for me. And they're talking, and I know that they're not, and I said, I need brought me a phone on a thing, a red phone, and I called my mom, I said, I need somebody down here, I think. And I looked at, right when I looked at there was a cross on the wall, St. Vincent's, and I looked at the cross. My son was 1 month old. I said, I got to get out of here. I can't die. I can't die here. I've got a 1 month old son. Yeah. So yeah, my mom came down, and then my dad came, and I had an advocate for the rest of the days, several days I was there. Got out, and again, that's when they severed the balance. And so I did have a palsy because they irritated the nerve. So for 3 or 4 months, this side of my face didn't work. Actually, who had the exact same thing as Mark Ruffalo. Mark.
Yes, yes, I actually knew that. I didn't realize it was the same thing that you've had, but I didn't know he had brain surgery. Yeah, and I knew that he had. Yeah.
And he was fortunate. He took a year off. And they told me, they said, you need to take at least a year off. But I have a kid, and I had money. I can't. Right. So I took 6. And I remember I started walking, from the first day I got from my bed to the bathroom. The next day I got from my bed to this door outside my bathroom. The next day I got to the front door. The next day I got to the driveway. The day after that I got to so finally after 2 or 3 months, I was actually sort of running, but I was running into posts. I was running into things. I was hitting things. And still to this day, when sound comes, it's very difficult for me to know where the sound is coming from and I always go here. I always go to the right because that's where I'm deaf. So I'm stone deaf right here. So I always go here first, and it may be coming from here. And my wife is so wonderful. It's always so wonderful because she'll always sit on my right side. No matter what, she just always sits on my right side. So if I can't hear things, she'll say, Chris, and she'll tap me or this or that. She's wonderful. But yeah, so I actually read I remember I shouldn't have been auditioning. I was in
No, I was gonna say not no. Oh my gosh.
and then I did 6 months to the day. I did another Christmas movie because it was an offer. And I did it with Christine Taylor, who was wonderful. And it was with a Morgan Shepherd, who was a wonderful guy. I played Santa. And Christine was amazing. And I told the director, I said, listen, guys, so I would shoot a scene. I would go back and lie down, shoot another scene, go back and lie down. And so we got through it. Christine was still a great friend. And then I just started slowly piecing stuff back together. But as you know, it's so hard. And then to be out really a year and a half, 2 years, when you're here, and then to try to build back up. And I don't regret any of it. I mean, obviously they got the tumor and it made me such a better person. I'd never really been sick before.
I'm looking at you. You're a specimen. I'm only seeing you from the chest up, and I said, "Oh, this guy's a specimen." So, like, have that stripped away from you.
Yeah,
it's got to be devastating.
Yeah, it really did a number on me. My marriage obviously didn't survive for many reasons. I don't know that was certainly one of them, because I certainly was career first a lot of the time, at that age. And fortunately, that's why obviously the second time around, I've learned that that's not the way to go. But we get along great, and we parent well together with my son, and he knows. I mean, again, it's that adversity, and of course the title is a Springsteen song. I love Bruce.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, that's where the title. I was driving in my car one day and I was listening to Trying to Walk Like a Man, and I was like, that's because, again, and my mother always said, Christopher, you do walk like a man. You don't have to try. And I said, well, but sometimes when things happen, you have to try too, right? Mm-hmm. So.
How cathartic was it to put that down on paper?
But also to inspire other people in terms of like how much of a warrior and what you went through and what we take for granted, and to put that into a book so that other people can learn from that. Absolutely. That's really powerful.
What do they say? Get knocked down 6, get up 7. It is sort of a mantra. And it is. And I also say, never put because they don't know if they've attributed that to this. But acoustic neuromas have gone way up because I think people put their cell phone to their ears. I haven't put my cell phone. I only have one now. So since the surgery, I've never put my cell phone to my ear.
Oh, wow. Ever. I didn't know that.
Yeah, gives off radio waves and waves that,
that you're putting directly into your.
Yeah, I'll still use an earbud to listen to music or something like that, but I'll never put my phone to my ear again.
So thank you for sharing all of that. And where can people get your book?
I think it's still on Amazon.
It is on Amazon. Yeah, it's definitely there. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah. So I think that's where it is. And go buy it. I don't know if I get a dime or a nickel or whatever, but books are still good. Read books.
So we already shared stories about these things, and we wanted to hear about yours. The central metaphor of Buffy is high school as hell. Do you have any high school as hell stories, or any school? It doesn't have to be high school, but any period of school being hell for you?
Well, I think high school. Gosh, I think high school for almost everyone. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some people that, the real popular kids, I think that high school was their best 3 or 4 years of their life. And depending, I was in a junior high, so I only had 3 years of high school. But I certainly was not one of those. I was sort of kind of in that gray middle of, I wasn't unliked, I wasn't really liked, but I certainly was trying to fit in with people. And, I had my crew.
So you mentioned that period of time. Have there been other times in your life that you felt like an outsider trying to fit in?
Wow. Well, I think obviously, when you, with this in the entertainment business, right, you're always, especially when I started. And then I think also after my brain surgery, I was at best 90%, and I knew it. And I know I'm deaf in my right ear, and balance is not great. And I'm trying to kind of do this thing that I used to be so good at. And I was kind of here. You feel on the outside all the time. And I think even now, I feel like a little bit of an outsider now.
Okay. So what is the best date you've ever had and the worst date you've ever had? Since you're going on a first date.
The wide spectrum. All right. Well, the best date I've ever had, obviously, and it's the truth, was the first date with my wife.
Mm-hmm. Same for us with our respectives. Yeah.
And we met on a dating app. We met on Tinder. And
oh my gosh, that's amazing!
Yeah. Wow,
and I was shooting something at the time, and she turned me down. She didn't terminate, but she rescheduled a couple times, and she thought she was kind of like. She found out who I was, and of course I didn't, because she at the time was working at Apple, so she knew. She was like, I'm not gonna go on a date with him.
Did she data mine you?
She just knew who I was, and I didn't have a clue. When we met at the Misfit in Santa Monica, and I told the bartender, I said, listen, keep the Manhattans going, all right? Because my last 2 dates have been brutal. So I just keep them on a conveyor belt. And she walks in and she sits down, and literally from the first moment, I was like, this woman is amazing. I stopped the conveyor belt of Manhattans. I think I kissed her in the first 3 or 4 minutes of
Oh my
of the
gosh.
date. I just kind of reached over. She goes, yeah, it was a sloppy kiss. It wasn't very great. But we got along, and she thought I was going to be a complete idiot. But because my Tinder profile was misspelled, and it was just a mess because I had done it probably having a few Manhattans.
So she was surprised, like, oh wait, you're actually smart.
I'm going to tell him. He's going to know that I'm a mom. I've got 2 kids, and I was like, "Oh, I'm a dad. My son's 4." And she was like, "Oh, okay." And then
here's the story.
Yeah, right. I went to college at the University of Arizona. I said, "Oh, I went to college. I went to the University of Washington." She's like, "You went to college?"
What a line.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you went
That's
to college.
funny.
You're not this idiot guy. And so we just kept talking, and she's this beautiful, strong woman, and that I've literally I fall in love with more every day. And it's been 10 years, I think. Yeah, 9, 10.
Yay.
Yeah. So that's got to be obviously that's my best first hit. And second one can go where I actually went on a date with this guy. And it was just terrible. But then thought I was talking to say her name was Julie. And I thought I was talking to another Julie. And I set up
and it was her again?
So I set up another date with this other girl.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
I really didn't like her, right? It was at a restaurant in Beverly Hills, but it's where you can kind of walk in one way and you can go around and you can walk out the other way. And I walked in and I saw the girl that had a horrible first. And I couldn't believe, I didn't even believe that she would want to see me again. I mean, it was terrible. I don't remember why it was so bad, but it was really bad. So this is the longest, it doesn't sound great, but she was sitting and I kind of like walked by her and walked into the bathroom and then walked out the other side and left. So that's got to be the worst. I mean, because that's
gosh.
that was it.
Oh my God. I think that takes the prize. That's
I
crazy.
mean, you got to cut your losses at that point.
Cut your losses. I was like, there's no way I'm sitting here again.
Yeah.
And I screwed up.
There's no nice way out of that.
Right. And
Could you let her know on the app? Could you let her know, like, or you just?
I think I did. I think, I got, I don't really.
Yes.
I did for both of us because it was not.
Yeah, no, you did the right thing.
You know what I mean?
This was not,
Well, this has been absolutely amazing. Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you wanted to talk about and that we should ask you before we all go back to our respective lives?
There's the show that I finished called Going Home. It's on a Great American Pure Flix. It's a small streamer. It's 2 seasons. Charisma's in the first season. It's not a laugh fest. It's all about actually a woman, Cynthia Gary, who runs a hospice home.
Oh.
But I didn't really know anything about hospice until this last year, where my dad was in hospice, then my mom was in hospice. My mom was in a similar hospice home for the last 4 days of her life. And so it's a really touching little show. It's got a really nice cast and shoots up in Eastern Washington, which I know the producers, Dan Merchant, Rich Cowan. Dan's the showrunner and a heck of a guy and a heck of a writer. And for people that are losing people, if you have sick parents, if you have sick relatives that are in hospice, it's a loving show in that way. And in the first season, Charisma's dying and I'm her husband and I've got kids and she dies at the end. And then the second season is all about sort of grief share and coming out of that with kids and family. And
it sounds beautiful.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a really nice show. And it was on, so Great American Pure Flix. And so you can catch that. And I think I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of it.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you
much.
told everybody about that so that they can watch it and check it out. This has been an absolute delight. The time flew by. We've been talking for hours and it feels like 10 minutes. And thank you so much for sharing your time. I know that you have a lot that you're dealing with right now. And so we really appreciate it. And it's just been a blast getting to hang out with you.
Yeah,
it's been great. Thank you both. Yeah, it's been a nice, as I was telling my wife when I went in and got some more iced tea, it's been a nice diversion from life for a little bit. Wonderful questions, a bit of memory lane, which is always fun.
See you next week when we'll do it again. And most importantly, until next time, go out and slay it.